It's a beautiful day again. A couple of changes to the agenda. IFS, they'll hold off their report until the June 2nd meeting. And then there was some material that through some miscommunication didn't get put on the agenda, and that is the information item about the USEM P&T materials. And Deb has it, and so she'll pass it around for an information item today. And then the only other announcement, Nico is here to discuss student election voting, right?
Yes. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt the meeting for too long. I was just wondering if you all could pass on to your constituents to remind your students to vote in the upcoming elections for student body positions, if you will. The ASSOU positions, there's a presidency and vice presidency, and then there's senatorial positions. And that's next week, the 27th to the 30th. If y'all could just give a plug in your classes really fast, that'd be awesome. We just believe that student support is needed and their voice should be heard. So that's all, and I'll get out of your hair and then y'all get back to your meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, could you repeat what the dates are of the election?
Next week, and we don't have school on Monday, so it's the 27th through the 30th.
Okay, great.
And, they will get the information in an email from the student. I don't know where it's coming from, but the survey to vote will be within the email. And again, that comes out next week.
Great.
Just a small plug would be fantastic. All right, thank you all. Enjoy your meeting.
Thanks.
All right, and on that note, does not look like ASSOU is here to provide their report. Since we're skipping the IFS report, let's cruise on to the HEC report. Lee.
Sure, and Jody asked me to kind of mention the tie-in between the IFS work and what's going on and what's happening with the HEC right now, because we're working in collaboration to get together a textbook proposal which will move forward to the HEC when they're here on June 12th. So just a reminder, they'll be meeting in the Rogue River Room from 9 until noon, and then the HEC will be going over to the Hawk to have lunch, and then doing a campus tour, and several of you have been involved in preparing that. Last time I was here, we sent out an update of the strategic plan. So today I brought you some of the action items that have been moving forward and how we're doing with that strategic plan, so that folks can just kind of stay tuned as to what's happening and how things are moving. So this kind of clarified the 40-40-20 work and how we're getting there in some of those pieces, the timeline, notes, who's working on what, so that'll give you a clear idea as to the partners in it. But if you've been following the Pay It Forward, or you've been following the Free Community College, or you've been following should we change the way math is aligning with what we're doing in the state, all of those updates will happen here at the full HEC meeting. So the subcommittees, the student success meeting, and the alignment of government subcommittees, they all present where they are as we move forward with the HEC full committee meetings. And certainly as that agenda is prepared and things are released, I'll make sure that it goes out to the Senate members. So if you have questions or you want to participate in public testimony, that you're aware of what will be discussed that day. Yes.
Liz got a call this afternoon that the HEC wants to meet in Medford.
On Wednesday.
Okay.
So the subcommittee will meet on Wednesday.
Okay.
There's an initial proposal, we do a reception here, and then the full committee would be here on Thursday.
Okay.
They've asked to move the reception to Medford.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions? Yes. Well, the piece from IFS. So myself and Jeff Dentz from Eastern Oregon University, who is our IFS president, have been working on an update for the HEC. The HEC did a report in 2012 which tied how textbooks are purchased and what we're doing to alleviate some of the costs to students as we try to keep costs even for students in our Oregon University system at that particular point in time. This year we were asked to revisit it. We were told in November from the Oregon Student Association that the second most pressing concern for students is the rising cost of textbooks and not being able to afford them, along with the increases in tuition. So we have picked up that report, Jeff and I. We've been looking over what was recommended. There were 7 recommendations that came forward,
And we've been gathering pieces to put together. So we completed a literature review as to who's doing what in the United States and what seems to be working and not based on what they recommended. Now we're pulling together from the campuses. So what you'll be hearing from Jody Waters is anything that your program or area is doing to help alleviate the cost of textbooks for your students. So math is on the 5-year plan. They've adopted some things and are hanging on to them longer. Several of us have done that, whether it's a custom book or ebook options or rental options or putting things on reserve in the library if they're costly. Those things will come together from each of the formerly known OUS schools to represent where we were in 2012 and where we've gone. And then we'll be putting together a recommendation for a one-day convening with the right members to kind of wrap our hands around some of the incentives that might come into play with giving a cafeteria approach to if we can meet this type of cap or this type of cap for our students, how will you incentivize that? One of the things that HEC has said is that, well, we'd be willing to put some money into having things on reserve at the library, and some of the libraries, not ours, have said, well, we don't necessarily have the storage capacity to hang on to all those things. So we're gathering everything together. We're bringing the right folks to the convening for that. That will happen in October, and will be funded by the HEC, and then hopefully we'll move forward with a matrix that really represents the faculty voice. We'll have the right players, including the bookstores and other folks at the table, but we want this to be faculty driven. So the last thing I think anyone in this room would like to see is someone telling you what you can or can't use to accompany your classes. So, questions on that? Yes?
Lee, I've got a question. I wanted to back up to the HEC before. And you said that you mentioned that the subcommittees are going to report, but I'm curious on the 2 free years of community college. Are they are the reporters or somebody asking the question? What does that do to universities, and how is there going to be a transition plan for employing maybe a 2-2-2 system like we have in
We've talked about the 2+2 programs, which are very big in states like Florida and others. Have they gotten that far? No. But one of the things that is consistently mentioned to me, and one of the things we might put on our radar as we go into one more year before the HEC takes over our control with our budgets, is the thing that has always been an advantage for the community colleges in Oregon is they've had a united voice, and that has not gone away. The united voice of the Oregon University system has. So many of the campuses, including the smalls, Western is usually represented, and of course Jeff is there from Eastern as the IFS president. Many of the campuses have someone attending the HEC meetings and getting involved in subcommittee work because they want the voice of their campus, now that it's kind of like a campus for themselves, to come together. And the IFS is hoping through the collaboration of this textbook piece that we can continue to have some form of collaborative voice from the faculty, that will be very important. With the free community college, the pieces that are moving forward on that is how would that differ from Pay It Forward? They want a pilot of Pay It Forward to hit in fall of 2015. So that is really driving that particular group fast and furious. The other aspect about that is they don't want it to be one of these programs that ends up being much like the affordable health care, where the people who are opting into doing this and paying it back in the long run are people who will be in some of the lowest income brackets out there that may or may not be able to keep this pipeline going as we're building it. So there's all types of things that have been put forward, that have been examined and are out there. Those reports are slowly being accumulated to the point where they'll be released, but that's a great question, and the 2+2 programs would become very important and critical for those campuses as we talk about, especially the 40-40-20, because those Oregonian students become so important to us as we think about meeting those demands for that model. Okay.
Great, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Lee. All right, before we have a conversation with President Cullinan, Dan is here, Dan Morris is here to talk about the campus theme for the 2014-2015 academic year.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know you could have, well, I did see you again ahead of President Coleman before. We're glad to be here. Let me just give you a quick rundown of what we did this year a little bit. Many of you may have been here in the fall when Dr. Cornell West came. That was, of course, a big event for the campus and part of our campus theme, although it was paid for primarily by SOU Student Affairs. We don't have that kind of budget in our campus theme program. But we did have this year, let's see, 15 other events throughout the year. We had, just this term, we brought Dr. Christy Dotson from Michigan State University, an African-American philosopher, and concluded just last week with a very interesting and engaging discussion with Eric Levine from theater and some actors from the Shakespeare Festival about race and theater, which I think might actually generate some more discussion between the Shakespeare Festival and the theater department based on the outcome of that. I don't know if Derek's talked to you about that, Jackie, but we'll see. So anyway, we involved 16 different faculty and 6 off-campus presenters that were involved in our campus scene this year. I think most of you have received, hopefully it was sent around, David sent it around in the email, the proposal for next year. One word title, Revolution. So right now, I guess we're just opening discussion and would welcome endorsement from the Senate eventually on that theme as we move forward. Or if you have any questions about theme in general, we'd be glad to answer them. But this concludes our 5th year, by the way. We started 5 years ago, so just finished with our 5th year.
How did you come by that thing?
We just thought of it. Nothing specific. You know, we throw around ideas, and we usually present a theme proposal for the following year a little earlier, but the events of the winter term got us a little distracted from that. We didn't get engaged in that very much. But there were a number of things that came up, and we just decided on this one.
Well, the word appears several hundred times in Newton's Principia.
I think it's a cool theme and very timely.
Thank you. Any other?
Particular questions? Motions to waive the 2 rule? Okay, well, thank you very much for the information, Dan, and we'll make sure it's on the agenda for consent. President Cole?
And I do want to thank everybody that's participated in the campus theme. I think it was just a great idea coming up with having a campus theme. And I think this one has gone really well. It was wonderful having Cornell West here. And I'm sure Revolution will be also an awesome event, an awesome theme. Just a reminder that as this is more an announcement that we are having our retirement and recognition event tomorrow. And that Stella is the MC. And in the spirit of revolution, there'll be cake afterwards, leftover cake. So we'd love to see people there. I was just going to talk about or hear questions about conditions. Did you send folks?
No, I waited until today.
Okay. Okay. So we did arrive at the conditions document that Bob Davies and I have been working with the board, primarily with Jim Middleton, who was the chief negotiator for the board on the conditions. And so we've been back and forth and worked out something that was okay with all of us. And on Friday, the board voted they made some tiny punctuation changes, but essentially they voted to support the conditions. The idea is that the governor is supposed to approve the conditions by today. I haven't heard anything yet. However, I know Jim Middleton was in communication with the governor's office all the way through the process. So, and in fact, you know, we were getting messages back from the governor as we were going along. So presumably, this is all going to go forward as planned. So, Dave can certainly share with you what I shared with him. I was only concerned that there might be tweaks and we'd have multiple versions out there. But as far as I know, we're going with the version that got approved by the board on Friday. The main pieces are, as we anticipated, would be financial. The other piece is really just more focused on mission. And so the idea is that there will be 3 review points in time. And the first would be in June 30th of 15, a year from now, which is just before our board would come on board. And so that just means that over the course of this coming year, administration at SOU and at Eastern will be working with our current board and Chancellor's office on, I'll read it here, to clarify and strengthen mission, develop strategies to foster a competitive niche within the mission, and provide a pathway toward long-term financial viability. So, I think that's where we need to be clarifying our thoughts about our mission and how much we want to, keep of what we have of our mission and how much we want to make any changes that would come forward. But I still think the main thing will be financial, and our retrenchment plan is in place, and I think we have, we've laid out those benchmarks pretty well. Eastern is not as far along as we are. They presented their financial plan to the board on Friday. So, they're going to be moving forward with theirs. So that just means ongoing work with the Chancellor's office and with the current board through this coming year. And then December 31st of 15 would be a review, and that provides feedback again on mission, on programs, contributions toward 40-40-20, and again, financial stability. Now, our new board would only have been in place, from July 1 of 15 to December, so there's not a whole lot of time for them to really make much difference, but the idea is to see that the institutions are on a positive trend. I think this is really about trend analysis. And then the third and final review is December 31st of 2017. Now, I will say that, I pushed to have it be farther out because I wanted to have our board that would start in 2015 have an entire term, for their 4-year term, to get done what they need to get done. But as I think I mentioned to you before, the governor wants to be in on all of this, and he wants to get things done before he's out of office. So that was his pushback. I think the good news is that we will be doing our major accreditation review in fall of 2017. We're going to be doing a lot of work on all of these areas, and actually getting these conditions off our back sooner rather than later is not a bad deal. So the third and final review is December 31st, 2017, and they're mostly all financial, that we would provide financial statements, all kinds of supporting documentation, and then there's a series of ratios. Primary reserve ratio, debt burden ratio, contribution analysis, those kinds of things, as opposed to a flat number that is not just saying, well, they have to have a 10% fund balance or this much money in the bank. And so Bob Davies and I were very clear that these ratios had to be, or I'll put it the other way, had to be on the same status as the other universities in the system. That is, we didn't want to find ourselves in a situation where we had a higher standard to live up to than the others. And so that is in there as well. And the emphasis is on a trend rather than on, by gum, if you don't have this number, we're going to take away your government award. And so the idea is that as we move forward, we are showing progress. and we are working toward these ratios, and we have all the obvious audited statements that back that up. So I think it's as good as we're going to get. I think it was really, really important that our conditions be also in reference to the other state universities in the system. And so, I think that's all. Dave can certainly send you what I sent him on Friday. I doubt that we're gonna see any changes to all of this. I would feel a little better if I heard that the governor had approved. But I have to assume that he will have done so by 5 o'clock, but perhaps has not, nothing has been said to the residents as yet. So that's what I know, and I welcome any questions, though I may not be able to answer it.
Well, I'd like to go on record for the school business, that we're dissatisfied with the fact that it's simply financial. We think that it's set up for failure, and we think it's unfortunate that everything's gonna be governed and decided based upon, you know, every program that's created, everything that we're gonna be doing over the next 4 years is based on money.
Yeah. I appreciate that, especially coming from the school business.
Yeah.
I mean, there's stuff about mission, but in some ways the mission piece aggravates me more because I think we have, you know, we have a reasonable mission, and I just assume that we worked out our mission and not have others telling us what they think our mission should be, but it's a side note.
So President Goldman, if the metrics or the ratios are good as of 2017, December
So
31st,
lift the conditions.
does that mean, okay, conditions are gone and we can have our,
We just
our
move
item
forward.
from then forward?
Right.
And what happens if we don't?
That is unclear. That's the thing. I mean, I think at that point, and that's why the governor still wants to have his say. At that point, he could say whatever he wants. He could say, now you're gonna be part of Oregon State, or now there's gonna be a coalition of the 4 universities, or I don't know, or maybe he'd make a different, maybe he, you know, if Eastern doesn't have good numbers and SOU does, he might make some differential decisions. So we don't know what would happen. But I guess my Pollyanna version of this is, it would be a major thing for him to take away our board when they've just gotten started. So I mean, I really do think that this is going to work out, that we're gonna have our own board for the foreseeable future. And, you know, it would obviously be so disruptive to say to these folks who have committed their time and energy to coming in and being our governing board, to tell them that, well, we've decided that, you know, in your 3 years of work, you're not doing a good enough job for SOU, and the Oregon State Board could do better. So I think it's just, I think we will be fine, and we will have our own board, and he just wants to have his say about this. But there isn't a clear path. If they, you know, if we don't meet conditions, we don't know what would happen.
Okay, and I'd like to just say,
Yeah.
just so that it doesn't fall on you, but
Yeah.
if we don't meet conditions, then there's a chance for deeper cuts and program reevaluation. That's all open.
Yeah. I mean, and, you know, and again, come back to mission, I mean, I would be very concerned if, even in the course of this coming year, if there's pressure on us to really change our mission in some significant way. I mean, if they say, for instance, you know, you just need to serve your region and stop trying to serve all those folks from around the West, that means, you know, you're gonna be a school of 2,000 students. That would be a rather serious change for us. So, you know, those kinds of concerns is why I really want to be able to have strong campus discussions about mission and planning, so that we can tweak as needed as we look at it and be firm when others come in who don't know us at all and just sort of say, well, you need to do this or you need to do that, you know, you need to be 50% online or, you know, whatever concept somebody might have. Yes.
Other than the implications of whatever comes out with the mission statement, changes or no changes, was there any thing in these conditions related to the curriculum of the university or related to the administration of the university?
No, there's a reference to program, and I think that's in the second review where they're talking about mission refinement and program. I think that's where there's, you know, issues of how we would respond essentially if we were back into a retrenchment situation, I guess. But no, there's nothing else. This is really, as I have said all along, it's about getting us financially stable, and that's what they're looking at. And you know, if I look at it from the positive point of view, of course that's what we all want. So, okay, we have a plan that's a pretty good plan, and I would hope that we just be able to march along through the plan as we have laid it out. But they're not giving us any other guidance at this point.
Mary, what's the point of the June 30th
Yeah.
point? Because we won't have anything
We won't.
in place.
Yeah.
And it almost seems like a wasted time period. I mean, to choose that one so early. But I guess it's
Yeah.
a done deal, but I just was curious.
It's to ensure that we work with the Chancellor's office and the board this coming year.
Okay.
I mean, that's what it's, that's really what it is, that we'll work with them, you know, and this is where just providing a pathway, developing strategies, fostering a competitive niche, all those things. So there aren't any benchmarks laid into these that we have to meet by June 30th. It's just, we'll be working with these folks.
Mary?
It seems like we have maybe there's some pockets of mission, new mission, or keeping our same mission. What's your feel from Salem on what they want us to be? I mean,
And it's not Salem, it's our state board, which of course is mostly changing in a few weeks. And that's where I get, I won't say irritated. I am concerned because they're often completely different directions. I do get this, well, you need to serve the region, but no one will tell me what that looks like. I mean, does that mean we don't even try to have students come from around the country? Do we're just, you know, our 5 top programs and that's it, or something? And then there are others that are, you know, saying maybe you just need to be, you know, this little arts-oriented institution. What are you thinking? So they don't know.
right.
That's where I just say they don't know.
It seems like we get confused with the Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
Yeah, we're confused.
More than we get confused with being an academic institution. It's sad, but.
I mean, I did have this ridiculous, I think I may have told you, this conversation with one of our board members where I could see we were not communicating, and finally I realized that he thought the liberal arts were the arts. And so anytime when I was saying, you know, we're a liberal arts institution, he's thinking you're all about music, theater, and visual art. And I mean, that's after he'd been on the board for, you know, 6 years or something. So this is why I'm excited about having our own board. I mean, I think we can educate people and they can work with us. But I am concerned that people who don't know us will be making assumptions about our mission. We need to be taking the lead on that, and as I say, I'm fairly happy with our mission. I mean, I think we have to be, you know, serving the region, but also bringing people from beyond the region unless we want to be a much smaller institution. So I'm not sure how else to address that problem, but I will be seeking everybody's thoughts, and I welcome thoughts, but I mean, we don't have a bad, I think we have a pretty good mission overall. We can certainly tweak it, but I worry about people from afar thinking they know what we should be doing in some significant way.
So, Sherry and
I was hoping, the reason the mission got in here was that I understood Eastern is making some rather dramatic changes in their mission. And because they wanted one statement for both, this particular piece was directed more at them and not at us. It sounds from some of your comments that maybe that's incorrect.
I think it's incorrect. They're very happy because Eastern is saying that they don't think they can be so much of a liberal arts institution. They're saying we need to be online, we need to serve Eastern Oregon, we have this very pragmatic mission, and we won't be able to do these other things as much. And I've never said that. And I don't know what to say that, right? But I think they could understand what Eastern was saying, and they can't quite understand this animal that we are here.
To segue, just a little, maybe it's a segue from Sherry's comment. You mentioned, Mary, that you and Bob Davies were pushing that SOU and EOU not have different conditions than the rest of the universities. Was there any, do you think there'll be any legislation around that? Anything written about that, guaranteeing that, or?
Well, but I would hope the heck is going to be looking at this, and I know Ben Cannon was in on some of these discussions as well, that to understand that we all should be on the same playing field. The idea is to lift the conditions in 3 or 4 years, and we will all be on the same playing field. I mean, I think we're all concerned. If the state, for instance, continues to step away in a major fashion, we're not going to be the only ones suffering. I mean, PSU's in a serious condition. OIT and Western, you know, they're looking okay now, but that can turn as quickly as it has for other schools in Oregon in the past. So we just wanted to make sure, and I think at least I think Ben Cannon understands, and this document affirms that we shouldn't be held to some kind of standard that will be impossible if the state continues to step away. So, I mean, I don't know if there'll be legislation, but I think there's going to be pretty strong understanding that you don't just say, okay, PSU, you're fine, you're $15 million in debt, but you'll be fine, and you can keep your own board. But Eastern and Southern are, that's, you know, they shouldn't have their own boards because they're being held to a different standard.
Thank you very much.
David, maybe a question tangentially related, I think, but you made several comments in public over the last few weeks about the no confidence votes we had in the past year, and you indicated that you thought they were because of sore feelings, because of bargaining. Is that correct?
I've said that there were a whole confluence of things that had come together, that tremendous uncertainties and unhappiness across campus. And I said bargaining was one thing, but I said this was an unprecedented year for uncertainty and unhappiness.
You do realize, though, that reporters are latching onto that bargaining, and that's what's getting played in all the reports, both in Youngstown and in our local papers now, is that this has to do with absolute bargaining.
Well, I'm sorry if that's the case. I tell you, I'm very frustrated with the media. They've said a lot of things that are not true. So it's been a very frustrating time for me.
But I mean, you do realize that, we tried to make a point in the letters of telling you that it wasn't events of this year that caused the no confidence votes. This is an ongoing situation of responding to.
I understand that, but I also do think that this was a very difficult year, and I was just trying to make that point. And I tell you that the fixation, the media are just being really difficult to deal with, I would say.
But then you realize that it does go beyond absolute bargaining, that
I
we
do.
do have real concerns about the performance of
I do.
the administrators.
I understand that.
Okay.
And I also, I will say we had a good conversation on Friday. We had a lot of people in the East Room, and I think it was an honest conversation and helpful. But yeah, this was a pretty horrible year. I have to say that. So I haven't tried to gloss it over with anybody.
Thank you, President Cohen. I will forward that email from President Cohen so everybody has a copy of those conditions, so everybody, I'll do it this afternoon. Let's see, University Studies Committee material. Wait,
So before you have two courses that were submitted to University Studies that I think are pretty straightforward this go around in asking for requests for approval, and I'm certainly interested if you have any questions. We will be submitting our end of the year report, much like many of the programs in other areas on campus. We spent a lot of time this year with just wondering where we were going with university studies and what was going to happen with houses. So these were the only two courses that came to us for approval this year that went through all of the process. So we had a really low year for the number of courses that were requesting approval for university studies. We also realized that programs have gone through prioritization, that they're right-sizing themselves now under the retrenchment model, and that folks feel a little more secure now that university studies, as we know it, is changing. So we're hoping that as we go into fall, that we'll see once again many courses moving forward. Questions about the exploration or integration course that has been brought forward?
From that fire, do you know who's gonna teach that, 476?
Ethics?
Yes.
No.
David Rubio, does that sound correct? He submitted the paperwork.
I bet
along with
David
Joan
would then.
McPhee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And along with Joan McPhee, they submitted it together. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's some team teaching or thoughts of collaboration that
Okay.
they submitted.
This is kind of like, is the process that we'll get, when will we see these from curriculum committee? Or do we need to make a motion or approval now?
The Ed English course already came through for a hard number through curriculum committee, and the business course has been a course for many years. So the way they come through here is the template of university studies. They are courses that have now been approved for the catalog, and now they're requesting university studies status as courses. Great question.
Move we approve.
So currently it's the first time that this material's come forward as far as an information item. So if we do approve it, we would need to waive the 2-week rule.
I'll look to do that.
Okay, there's been a motion to waive the 2-week rule. Is there a second?
I will.
Kevin's quick. All right. Any particular discussion on that item as far as waiving the 2-week rule? All right. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The 2-week rule carries, and now is somebody interested in making a motion to approve these two courses presented as university studies courses?
So
Okay, and there's a second, we have to click on the draw again. All right. Any other discussion about these two particular courses as being an F-strand and an I-strand course under university studies? All right, then, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, the next item, a little bit more material, but two individuals and maybe more individuals to talk about the 7 academic policy proposals coming forward. Brian and Jamie, is that correct?
Jamie, yes.
Jamie, okay, so if you want to just preface which one you're talking about and then just kind of give us a brief background
I think
on
Brian's
that
gonna
particular one.
present and then I'll answer questions.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm Brian Fedork, I'm the chair of the Academic Policies Committee. With me is Jamie Ross, who is our degree coordinator. So 6 of these policies she created and proposed, and the Academic Policy Committee reviewed these, we unanimously approved these, and so we're bringing them to the Senate to recommend these policies changing or concerning graduation and admissions. There's 6 of those, and then there's another one that came from the Intercollegiate Athletic Advisory Committee. So I didn't know if there's, and I think Matt's there, could answer questions about that. So I don't know if there's any recommendations on where to start. All right, well, I'll just start with the missed class policy then, just because that's just completely separate. So Jane Picknell asked us to review this missed class policy, which I believe Dave has sent. Really the only issues that we had, we changed the language, and so you should have the approved language that Academic Policies Committee approved of. So I don't know if there's any questions on the missed class policy for student athletes. Yes?
Yeah, one of the concerns that I have is if an athlete is allowed to miss 15% of the class.
Which one are you referring to, principles
I'm
number
looking
10?
at number 10. The way that I set up my class policies is that students get 3 absences, period. On that 3rd absence, their grade is lowered a full letter. It doesn't matter to me whether grandma died, whether they're at a game or something. And I'm concerned that having a special policy for athletes then will mean that we're gonna have to get into some kind of elaborate similar scheme for all absences. And if I was to keep my policy as it was, and then now the athletes could be excused for those 3, conceivably they could miss a lot of class and still pass. So I'm completely uncomfortable with it because I feel like it impinges on the faculty's academic freedom to grade as we do.
So that was discussed, and one of the arguments that was put forth against that kind of concern that we had was that many of these students are recruited to participate in these SOU sanctioned events. And so the idea, and this is just the principles behind the event, and so the procedure for that, one thing that we had was the onus, the vast majority of the onus was put on the students, if you look on the procedures page, to identify when they could possibly miss and then meet with you individually as a faculty member to engage in any type of missed work. We softened some language which you had on here to allow it that original proposal said that they will not be penalized, and the faculty members involved in that discussion said that was a little too strong, that we should soften it a little bit, and if they have to miss, that's on the procedure side.
So can you show me where, maybe I'm misreading this, and if I am, I want
So
to
procedures
correct
number
it.
4 is kind of where I'm referring specifically to. The faculty member will determine the accommodations which should neither penalize the student athlete nor unfairly advantage or disadvantage him or her relative to other students. In the case of missed quizzes, exams, or in your situation, your example, attendance, a faculty member may choose to have the quiz exam administered and proctored through the athletic department. However, some in-class activities, which I would assume would be attendance participations, cannot be made up and may impact a student's grade.
So let me get back to a question about this missed quiz thing. I just want to make sure I close all the loops. I had an instance this fall in which a football player said he was out of town for a football game, and a quiz had been available for 5 days on Moodle, and he said he didn't have access to the internet the entire time he was gone. So I just, trying to make sure that the syllabus is absolutely airtight and no funny business. So, I guess it's an issue of what determines. I see that the faculty member determines the accommodations, but I don't want to have this policy thrown back at me and say, well, Vicki, you're really being unreasonable. Did you talk that out?
Yeah, that's one reason why, for example, there were some things, for example, principles number 8, it was originally included to have, quote, mandatory for all students. If we wanted to have, in your copy, it should say in the very last sentence, these academic activities must be identified on the course syllabus as required. The original proposal that we had said, quote, mandatory for all students. So to use your example, if a student athlete says, hey, I have this, and we haven't really decided 100% where to include this, probably student athlete handbook. But if they came, I'm imagining many faculty wouldn't know about that. So we tried to soften that to allow faculty to determine what, you know, accommodations they may have for those student athletes.
So does that mean then that the academic activity has to be identified by date on XYZ we will do?
No, that was another question that was probably off the record, because apparently there are some faculty that do not have due dates in a syllabus. They just say we're gonna kind of go with the flow through the term and then there'll be something there. So we didn't wanna put something that specific, because it would violate, you know, academic freedom in the way that I view it, to allow faculty to teach at the rate and pace they so desire. So, you know, the principle behind this at the very beginning that we discussed that we thought was good was the onus was on coaches to not violate this, as well as student athletes to identify potential hiccups in the syllabus, and then therefore, and it says in here, I think within the first 10 days or the first 2 weeks of class, that they should be meeting with faculty. They're responsible to review the syllabus, note potential conflicts, bring them to the attention of the professors, and request reasonable accommodations in the event of missed quizzes, exams. I would probably also say class period as well.
So I just have one more question,
Sure.
Brian.
Sure.
What is the problem we're trying to solve by creating a policy?
Good question. So there is no policy right now. There's nothing right now. And so the IAAC,
What's that?
the Intercollegiate Athletic Advisory Committee.
I see.
What was happening, and I don't know if I'd be speaking off record, but a particular coach was asking students to be dismissed exceptionally early for a travel game for Friday in Portland, and they were leaving Thursday morning. And so it came to the attention of a faculty member that there's nothing to prevent that per se, but at the same time, that's probably not appropriate for coaches to kind of have, you know, 36 hours to Portland for their athletes. And so I think that what this really does is enable faculty to have a little bit more teeth and puts more of the responsibility on the student athlete to identify potential students that might have potential problems. I know in the crim department we have a lot of student athletes, and so there's quite a few situations where they may make the playoffs and we don't know about that, but at least personally I make it up front that if you have this issue, I always accept early work, never accept late work. So at least that allows them to turn things early if they have to.
It just seems to me that if we've created a policy over a naughty coach and we're hog-tying faculty, that's just not a, I have serious concerns about that.
And the other thing that this came from, this wasn't just created out of a vacuum. A lot of these policies were adapted from the NAIA conference recommendations, as well as looking at comparative universities that have these student athlete policies as well. So they I don't want to say copy paste because that's plagiarism, but they basically borrowed these policies from other places and created this SOU policy for missed class.
Thanks, Brian.
I was just gonna say, Vicki, this was a serious problem at least a while back, because I was on Matt's case a lot. And it was a place where, on top of this, the student was being caught in the middle between the coach and the faculty member. And this lays out much clearer where bounds are and puts more onus, I think, on the coach, so that they can't kind of stick the student in the middle in a way that I was really uncomfortable with the way it played out. I don't know how it went from your end, but this just seems to give a little bit more protection to our student athletes so that they don't quite get crunched.
Thanks.
Can I just ask, just to follow up, I think to Vicki, and maybe it's because we teach some similar things, or some different things that are required in terms of in-class work, but when the policy is saying that they will talk to the professor about possible accommodation, so that means in a course where participation in class time is everything, there would be no accommodation because that's not how class runs.
Yeah, and so, for example, number 6 on procedures, no faculty member is obligated to excuse a student athlete, and then number 7 says if a student athlete is advised, it basically says that perhaps the faculty should advise them to take it in a different term if appropriate,
okay.
So.
That's one to make sure.
All right, well, I'm really glad to see the clarification on practices, because for the first time ever, I had this come up where students were telling me, we have practice and we're meeting in Medford for practice and we have to leave a half an hour early from class to get there, and that didn't sound right to me, at all, and when I asked the coach, it wasn't right, but that was the message that was coming through to the students, so I think it's good to have some guidelines in.
So I'd just like to say, so our coaches obviously take this very seriously. Sometimes the student athlete in the middle will play it both ways. Yeah, that happens occasionally, but very serious about the academic progress for our student athletes. We have a 3.10 grade point average across the board for our student athletes. And so we wanted to create this along with the Intercollegiate Athletic Advisory Council to really give me some more leverage with coaches and put more onus on coaches and student athletes, and have some guidelines that faculty can look at and say, okay, well, I see that there are some accommodations that I can make, but I don't really have to, and it's on you. And so I think that's where we really wanted this to fall. We don't really have anything in writing.
Thanks for that one. Moving on.
So the other ones, there's 6 of them, and I apologize for inundating the chair with all these, but I would probably say, and say there's 3 that are kind of collective. So the first one I have here is the awarding the degree with financial hold on the account, and this was proposed by Jamie. So
I can point out the biggest thing with awarding degree with financial hold on the account is we currently have a policy that we don't award the degree until they clear their financial obligations. We want to just change that a little bit and say we still award it, but their diploma won't be mailed. Because what's happening is a student may clear it and never notify us, their degree never gets awarded, their employer does a check, they're told they don't have a degree. We also aren't getting to count them in our completion rates because we're not hitting the award button. So really we want to be able to count them for their good and ours, and we'll hold the diploma until they tell us that it's clear.
and they pay.
And they pay off, they have to get that cleared, pay it off, let us know.
And the other thing that's withheld is their official transcript as well.
Okay, I was gonna ask, because some people don't care about the diploma.
Right.
They care about the transcript.
The official transcript and the diploma are what's withheld until finances are done. But what's it called? There's something the clearinghouse of
The
some sort?
clearinghouse, the National Student Clearinghouse, which is our vendor for clearing for outside agencies to see that a student has a degree. They can still say, yes, they have a degree, but they have a hold on their account.
Plus, if we go through a degree funding model, perhaps potentially this is a good way to get credit for students that have completed coursework, just haven't paid their debt yet.
Yes. How many students does this apply to on an average year?
That's a great question, and I would love to be able to answer it. I will be truthful, and in years past, it's been an unofficial procedure that they were clicking award anyway and just holding the diploma, so I can't give you clear data because we were doing it before the policy was there.
Would there be numbers on how many financial holds there are?
Yes, we could pull those.
Any other questions on awarding degree with me?
Yeah, one more. You said that the incentive is that basically that we think that there's enough incentive for them to actually pay if we don't hold it. But if there's this clearinghouse, and so certainly for people who are going on for other graduate degrees, yeah, they have to have a transcript, but how many of them don't actually need a transcript and just contacting the clearinghouse is good enough? And so they won't pay. Is that a problem?
We haven't found that there's a problem with the student clearinghouse giving information or not giving information. There are actually a lot of students are getting held up because they don't realize their degree has never been awarded because it's just sitting there. And so they don't contact us to say, oh, I cleared this, go ahead and hit an award. So it's actually, we see it more negatively impacting students than having false positives.
I was worried about them just paying.
Right, but that's still built into what we're trying to do. They're still incentivized to pay, but we have more students who have paid it and didn't get their degree awarded, then we have students who haven't paid and got a job, which we want them to do so they can pay us.
Todd?
How many months is it after the money from a student is due before collection procedures are initiated? In a normal course of business?
I don't know the business. Do you know the business number on that?
Well, they usually have to start, it really depends on what kinds of financial loans they have. So there's a period in time in which they're in good grades. Most of them it's about 6 months after they graduate that they start paying. But before they would get to this default point, there's a lot of steps in between that the lenders are doing, like Sally Mae, to contact them and make sure they get to that point of default before that happens. But during all of that time, as long as they have that financial hold, they will not get that paper diploma. And it is a real incentive for a lot of students.
Well, I'm just wondering, isn't the incentive for paying their bill here the same as it would be for paying their bill anywhere? That is to say, to preserve their credit rating?
It should be. It's very difficult.
And for that reason, is it necessary for the university to have a separate policy?
Yes.
To hold their feet to the fire when that's gonna happen in any transaction they ever enter into anyway?
I have yet to come across a university or even community college that releases documents with financial holds on the account.
Well, what do you mean by that then? So what?
So I'm at least putting it out there that we are consistent with universities, higher education institutions of all sizes across the board. I don't know if anybody else has an example of somebody that's not doing that. So we would be abnormal if we chose to just throw out the policy altogether.
No, we don't want to be abnormal.
I just would say it would take a little more consideration if we were looking at completely taking it away. The other thing is that I can tell you that when I award degrees and a student has a hold on their account, the vendor sends them an email on our behalf, so it's all of our language, but they send it out to them that says, you have a hold on your account, you're not going to get your diploma. So it's not like they're not being notified of what's going on. They're notified that they have the hold, they need to pay it, they're given collections information on how to pay off, whatever reason they call it collections, but business services in order to be able to pay us. So it's not something just hidden from students.
Joe?
It seems like a reasonable change of policy, but there was a second thing you said about the students having to get back, notify you that they've paid it off. How complicated would it be for IT to send you a note that the bill has been paid and let you act proactively on the student's behalf once they've paid it off?
We've talked about that as a separate piece of how we want to do our outreach or just to clean up and send out diplomas. Part of the reason why we have not gone down that path right now is that we could mail it out, but we don't have their current diploma mailing address. A lot of times we have their parents or their local address, so we'd be sending it to just anywhere, and then we're gonna have to reprint again. So we'd rather have the student contact us so that we make sure we're sending it to the right place instead of eating that cost of printing diplomas that go to nobody.
So the second one is incomplete grades at the time of graduation. Well, I mean, the proposal, the rationale is on here. I mean, basically, what we're trying to do collectively is to accurately record when the student completed all of their degree work requirements, that their degree should be conferred in the term the grade change was processed. So there is a little bit of a buffer zone of 60 days that if you get an incomplete in spring 14, that you have 60 days to finish that grade, even though the catalog says a year. If you wait 61, well, I'm sure there's a case-by-case basis,
Yeah.
but generally speaking, if you wait 6 months, you wouldn't have your degree conferred until winter of 2014, or 2015, whatever it is, 2015. So I think it's just to kind of have a more accurate representation of when people finally finish their last thing that they needed for a particular class, which that class is needed for a degree.
Questions on that one? Seems to be getting easier. Next.
So collectively, the next one's the degree conferral term. So those two that we've just discussed, the I grade and awarding degrees with financial hold. Really all this one is saying is that the degree conferral date will occur when you finally submit that incomplete grade and you clear your not clear your financial debt, but when you finish your coursework.
What's happening here are that, for example, in theater, the students may have a big project that they're doing and they take their last class spring of 2014, but they don't finish it up until spring of 2015. Should we be awarding the degree in 14 or in 15? And we're saying it is when you finish everything, regardless of when your last class was, it is when you've actually turned in everything to the university. You may have heard it before, like back awarding degrees. We want to get rid of back awarding degrees because you weren't really done the same time as your peer who finished their last thing and left.
Even though they might walk in 2014.
Right.
Walking is not great.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's for sure. Why do we allow them? Why do we allow them to walk?
Certainly, no likes the first, I don't know.
So this was. Confuses though.
Confuses me too.
We're working on cleaning that up as well.
Oh, that's good.
Because our policy says that they have to have an approved degree application. However, based on how long it takes us to get degree evaluations back from departments or even internally, over the last 10 years or so, we've made it more loose. And we've just said you've applied for graduation. And we're looking at taking it back to the heart of our policy, which says it has to be approved, so that we have less students who are walking who already know about deficiencies. If they're deficient, they should be clearing those deficiencies, making a better plan, and then we'll allow you to walk. What won't change most likely would be the summer term. We still will be allowing summer term graduates with an approved plan, and they're on track to still walk. But we want to, I have students who have deficiencies still from fall that we're including in commencement, and that's not clean.
So this was, you were just talking about degree conferral term, right?
Correct.
But, and the policy statement is all about getting transcripts from other institutions or.
That is another component. Thank you for bringing that up.
That seems like the component to me for a degree conferral. I don't see anything else in the policy statement.
There's the two bullet points that go in there, the I grade and final term.
The two that we just previously discussed.
Yeah, that goes in there. But I didn't discuss it at great length because it goes with the other policy. But the other big component are transcripts, that they get approval to take their final requirement at another institution, and they don't send us their transcripts till years later. Do we award it in the term they took the class at that previous institution, or do we do it when we got the transcript and we can verify that they finished? And we're saying we shouldn't be back awarding, they didn't follow through with us. We should be doing it when they finish everything with us, which includes giving us their transcript.
Next. So the next one is maximum number of majors and minors for a single baccalaureate degree. Plain and simple, we said there's a maximum of 2 majors you can have and a maximum of 2 minors.
We have no policy. Banner does not support more than 2 of each. We make up a code in Banner, so it'll look like you have a psychology/ENDA minor because we don't have room for a third one, and it can mess up our data as far as how many students are in what program, as well as it makes our transcripts look messy.
And I would also say, at least from my recollection, is we're not preventing people from getting a third major. It's just now you have to pay for it in a post-baccalaureate way, instead of just coming here and just taking a whole bunch of majors. It's if you want a third one, you're going to have to pay for it, and that's kind of I think something we're not preventing them from doing something. We're just saying pay to do it.
Pete, how does this compare with other institutions, in particular the OUS institutions?
It's in alignment with all the other universities in OUS.
It's not on that one.
It's not on that one, of course not. I do have each one of theirs policy, but they all have a limitation on majors and minors. Any Banner school, it's the 2 and 2, because Banner doesn't support more than.
And they've written that as policy.
Yes. I believe we were possibly the only one that didn't have a policy on it, or at least OSU, U of O had them. And I know there are more in there, I just haven't looked at this for a bit.
The student is doing dual degree, and they get then more than the two,
Yes.
they get 2 majors and 2 minors with
On
each
each.
degree,
Correct.
and hit that 200 and whatever credits.
216 credits, yes. If they wanna do that, and it all lines up, we're okay with that.
I just thought that'd be an avenue for
Yes.
them.
Definitely is an avenue, if they're completing them at the same time through the dual degree program.
Going one. So the other one we have is minimum grade for BABS requirements. So this one was pretty easy for our committee. Basically, the argument is that in order to show proficiency in either the arts or the sciences, anything below a C- does not exhibit proficiency. So this was trying to ratchet up the rigor of, you know, a D- does not show proficiency. So there was a loophole that we found that figured that was a separate policy issue. So basically we were saying that you need at least a C- or better in the study of a foreign language at the second year or better, and you need a C- or better in the 7 or more credits in quantitative programming logic courses as well.
This does not play into the 48 credits that they need in each section, just the 3 for language or the 2 for the science.
If we're defining the minimum of proficiency as a C-, then why should it not apply to every class they take for graduation?
Todd, I asked the same question. That's a completely different policy aspect that I just tabled. That, I mean, that's a great discussion. I tried to have that discussion, but I figured that was a much larger discussion. Let's just focus on the degree aspect. And so that was it. I would agree personally. I would even say C+. But we're not gonna go there. But
Don't most departments already have that though, for courses taken for a major, have to be passed?
Yep, that's major. This is just for, so for example, I'll just use CCJ. If they get a D- in statistics, that shows that's all they need. They're done. They don't even have to retake it. If they got a D+ in a major class, they have to retake it. And so what this is saying is, if you're going to get a BS degree in CCJ or whatever, you need at least to have a C- in your math course and your math designated programming logic statistics course as well.
At least, but that doesn't speak to specific majors, because we require C+.
Right, so that's why we pulled this apart and said we can address those other ones in separate policies, because we're starting to pull 5 or 6 different things together, that if we said you had to have C- or better, we're now telling you what to do in your departments and you still want us there. So that's why we pulled out the baccalaureate requirements, which is still held within the register and the catalog piece, and said, let's start here.
So I guess the policy could go then to university studies.
You are the other piece, because that is the loophole Brian was alluding to, is that the quantitative reasoning strand D would still allow a D-